Hello and welcome to this tease of Here's the Pitch. I'm going to get to Jackie here in a minute, but I want to remind you, please subscribe, hit the subscribe button, and be a subscriber of this channel because you'll see whenever these new ones appear, and you get to be a special access person by being a subscriber to this channel of ST Weekly, Here's the Pitch. And share and comment and have some fun here as we're going to talk to Jackie about Robin. He's got some funny things about Robin. He talks about Tom Chiusano, interesting thoughts here. And then he also talks about his time with Eddie Murphy. There's a lot of fun new stuff here. This is my third chat with Jackie. Here's a tease. But again, subscribe. Make sure you're subscribing. This is for subscribers only. This is a special edition. I mean, do you have any hard feelings with Tom, or is that?
No. Could be, in all fairness to Tom, he had no say in any of it. But I did love screwing with her because she could be so pompous, and she was an idiot,
Welcome to another edition of Here's the Pitch. I'm your host, Brad. Thank you for joining me. And Masses Restaurants, of course, the sponsor of this program, stlmasses.com. Go there, look at those menus. If you're driving through St. Louis, you can find Masses, and you'll find, hopefully, one day in the future, Jackie, the Joke Man Martling, driving through St. Louis, doing some stand-up, and heading to a Masses Restaurants. Jackie, welcome back. I'm very excited again to talk to you.
How much, I don't remember how long ago we spoke or what we got into. Did I tell you I drove through St. Louis in 1966 and all that and everything?
We've covered.
Sure we've been through the whole.
Yes. Now, we started before this, actually, the broadcast, and I said, is this a green screen? What's going on behind you? And you said, that's Jokeland. That's where the jokes are made, right? Tell us a little bit about Jokeland back there.
This is, that's the endless folders and notebooks of all the stuff from all the years, and this is just endless crap. My old days in my bands and rock and roll and comedy and dial a joke and everything. This was a garage when I bought this house 22 years ago, and I threw everything out and cut open a square in the roof and redid it in pine. And now this is everything I own. People have told me this should be in a library somewhere. It's garbage, but it's interesting garbage,
It's garbage. I did not mention I'm wearing a kind of a Hawaiian shirt. I felt like I had to get a little dressed down for my appearance with Jackie. So are all your jokes catalogs, everything is that too much to ask to say that?
Everything is. This is like the same joke 400,000 times, I mean, I knew every joke in the world since the 70s. And I remember just having the night sweats in the early 90s because I knew it all had to be put into the computer. And I was so freaked out. And then I found out about that it was optical scanning. So you could put in pages and they would be in the computer. Of course, when you optical scan a page, you almost have to retype the entire thing, but at least it's a head start. And everything I got ever since the first album, I used to catalog like every joke singularly, and I had, a tag, like a I don't know what you call it, like a little notation in parentheses, like LL in parentheses was little old lady, or J in parentheses was Dirty Johnny, and I was a nut about it. And then when in the early 90s, when CDs were happening, I started from square one and using all the jokes. And so as it stands now, I have 6 CDs with like 80 minutes long each with not one repeated joke. It's like 500 minutes of solid, filthy, hysterical jokes,
What a career.
I've always just kept it. You know what I mean? It's just that's my thing. I know where all the jokes come from, and I only wrote a handful of them, but they've been around since the beginning of time. And people don't know that. They don't realize that, but it's pretty interesting. I find it interesting.
I believe that's Rodney behind you. Is there a Jackie puppet anywhere near? Did you get to keep the Jackie puppet?
You know what? I was doing one of these things at some point, and I forget how, and somebody saw the Rodney in the background, and they thought that was interesting. I said, you know what? From now on, when I do these things, I'm going to have them over my shoulder just because it's, because it's funny. I got a kick out of them. It was funny the other day. It's a somebody gave it to me years ago. It's a toy, and if you push the button, it tells. Yeah, it's Rodney telling a joke or two. And I never really listened to the whole thing. And the other day, I pushed the button because I put some new batteries in it, and I heard a joke that I had sent to him a million years ago that I didn't know. He never bought it. It didn't matter, but it was, and it wasn't even that funny. But I was like, wow, it was. High school. I wasn't very popular. I shared lockers with a mop, which is so innocently, stupidly funny,
I love
it out here. Everybody loves it out here. It's a haven,
What, but the puppet, the Jackie puppet, did you get to keep ownership of the puppet, or did that go away?
No. The story of that was so good, but it was given to me, but I told the guy not to give it to me, and he gave it to the Stern Show, and they have it. I don't know where it is, whether it's there or in the garbage or hanging up somewhere or something. There was a whole big deal, like after I left the show, where they thought I had stolen it. It was a really funny bit. It was a whole funny thing. I don't know if you knew about that, but it was so great. Do you know that story at all?
I remember the prank that was pulled on stealing the Baba Booey puppet, but I'm not sure if I know about the Gary puppet or the Jackie puppet.
What happened after I left the Stern Show? At some point, Howard went to. I forget the timing, but when Howard left, K-Rock for, I don't know, it was for 5 minutes or 5 years, became free FM. And they had like Penn Jillette had a show and a couple of people, and they did a couple of test shows with me. And I went in there and, just talked for a while and interacted with the engineer, and it was fun. I got it somewhere. It was fine, for what it was. And then at some point while they were at Sirius, somebody must have said, "Where's the Jackie puppet?" And nobody knew where it was. If you don't know this, I think this is such a great story. It's so indicative of so many things, but nobody could find it. And somebody said, "You know what? Jackie came in to K-Rock after we left, and we had so much stuff that was in the closets there. Maybe it was in the closet, and I bet Jackie stole it." So all of a sudden, Jackie stole it. So a couple of people called me up in the beginning when they first went to, I don't know how long it lasted, but they had a whole thing called Howard News. And there was a couple of people that worked for the Howard News 100, and any kind of snippet of anything they would jump on. So they were like, "Jackie, did you steal a puppet? Did you steal a puppet?" And it was so absurd, the concept that I would have been at K-Rock and looked around and sold it. So what I did was I took a picture of the Jackie puppet and I printed it so it was the size, a full-size thing of the Jackie puppet, and I cut it out and mounted it on cardboard and held it. So, it looked like I was holding the Jackie puppet. Of course, it was two-dimensional. I was holding the Jackie puppet and I was holding a copy of the New York Post. So you saw that day's headline, like a kidnapper does, so you can show that the kid's still alive.
A ransom note, basically. Yeah, a ransom Jackie puppet.
So I got the Jackie puppet on my lap, and I'm holding the Post. I said, "I got the puppet. I admit it. Come on and get it." So they're all ready to pile into the Howard 100 news van, and they were going to come out here. It was a whole big deal, and I felt bad about that. And I called up and said, "Listen, you morons. Of course I don't have the puppet. It just wasn't fair to make them come all the way out here just as a goof. I thought there was plenty of a goof that I pulled that much over on them." And then I got this great idea. I said, "Listen," I was talking to Steve, whatever his name. He was like one of the head news guys.
Steve Langford, Howard 101 News. Yes.
I said, "Steve, I got a great idea. There's a guy that used to come into the show once a year, once every 5 years, just some friend of the show that did lie detector tests." I said, "Get the lie detector guy and get everybody from the Stern Show to take a lie detector test." I said, I'll stand in line. I'll be the first one in line because I know I didn't steal the stupid puppet, and you'll be able to track down where it is." And he goes, "Jackie, that is the greatest idea. That'll be such a good bit. I can't believe it." I said, "Fantastic." I never heard from him again. he went to Howard and told Howard the idea for the bit and about that I would come in and take a lie detector test. The next morning, Howard brought in the Jackie puppet. He had it at home the entire time.
He loved it.
He just wanted it to go away. You know, he didn't want anything to do with me being around or anything. But he, you know, they knew if I said I didn't have it, if I don't know if they ever would have asked him, do you know where it is? But if they did, it just was very funny. It was very, very stupid. You know, it was absurd, like everything, you know.
Maybe
I never had more fun than sitting there with that 2-dimensional copy of I got the pictures somewhere. They're very funny, you know.
Well, I went back and watched a lot of the old stuff to see, and when the puppet would come out, and Howard would do it, then Fred, and then Robin would even try her Jackie voice, and then the music in the background, it just takes me back to those days where it was just so stupid and funny, you know. And I can't imagine that you even didn't even like it because it was a puppet of you doing stupid Jackie voice noises. It was funny.
Well, you know where it came from, right?
Well, a guy came in and brought it in, right? A guy built it and brought it in, I thought.
I came home one day, and my friend Billy, his truck was in my driveway. And I walked up to the truck, and sitting next to him, shotgun, was his friend Tom, who was a good friend. Tom was over here 2 days ago. And between the two of them was this little Jackie with a little joint in his mouth and a little, like a small tomato paste can, but they had made it into a Budweiser can. And I said, what's that? And Tom said, well, you know, I figured there's a Gary puppet. I thought there should be a Jackie puppet too. So I made this. And he showed it to me, and the mouth operated and everything. I said, that is so cool. And I said, why don't you bring it in and give it to the show? Give it to Howard. And I said, you know what, you guys, if I take this in and hand it to them, Howard will throw it right in the garbage and say, there's Jackie trying to promote Jackie. Same old crap. Jackie 922 wine, Jackie penthouse, Jackie blah, blah, blah. I said, what you got to do is you got to take it in like you're fucking with me and goofing on me. And you don't know me from nothing. And they said, okay. And a couple days later, Gary came and said, hey, Howard, there's a guy here who's got a puppet looks a lot like Jackie, and it's pretty funny. And Howard says, yeah. He says, yep. And he's got a girl with him, and she's very pretty. And it was his wife, Amy, beautiful girl. So he says, bring him in. So Tom comes in with his beautiful wife, Amy, and the Jackie puppet. And I'm like, oh, man, get out of here with that, you know. And I was like, you know, total phony, like the Brer Rabbit, don't throw me in the briar patch, you know. And they started taking turns with the puppet, and Tom did it, and Gary did it, and Robin, and I was, you know, acting all flustered. And meanwhile, me and Tom and Amy are winking at each other because that was exactly the plan that I knew would happen, and it wound up being a huge deal. If I'd have walked in and said, here's the Jackie puppet, they would have said, fuck you, and it would have gone in the garbage. So I always thought that was a pretty funny. And then Billy would do it, and I used to write lines for Billy to insult me. And Billy, they did a documentary on me that's done, and it's amazing. It's really fun. I shouldn't say amazing. It's about me, but it was done well. But Billy's saying, you know, I'm sitting there with a puppet of the guy sitting in front of me, and he's writing lines for me to insult him with the puppet that looks like him. He said it was the fucking Twilight Zone, which it kind of was, you know. But it was so fun. Those were amazing days, you know, just amazing.
I can't stop laughing hearing you do the Baba Booey voice. Oh, boff, go for, because he would get all excited like he knew something. And then he'd come in, and by the end of the time he was in, he was just leaving his head down because everyone was just, you guys had turned it on him. Just hearing you do that voice for the first time in like 20 years was great for me.
He would come in and try and tell Howard something and try and talk to him. And he'd turn to leave, and just as he's going out the door, I'd say, look at that ass. Said, Gary, come back. Oh, God, you know. And I used to fuck with Gary. I used to send him emails and break his balls in the emails. And he'd like, why would you fuck with me on an email? Nobody gets anything out of it. And I'd say, I do. And, well, we carried on and on, but it was always a good fun, you know. I mean, Bill, they said horrible, horrible, horrible things to me. But some of them I wrote, you know, I didn't, you know. Eventually, of course, they eventually do stuff that, you know, about my wife, whatever, that would get to you. But, you know, who cared? You know, that was that. that was the business we had chosen,
So you mentioned your documentary. I think the first time we talked was about a year ago. So this is our 1-year anniversary of being friends, Jackie. This is exciting. And I think at that point it was still being made. But tell me a little bit about, are we going to be able to see it?
I don't know where we left off, but we wanted Artie Lange in it, and Artie wanted to be in it. But then Artie got arrested and went to jail and went to rehab, and we're like, oh, well, I guess we blew that. But the documentary took so much time and been so drawn out that Artie cleaned up, got out of jail, got out of rehab, and he's one of the best interviews in the documentary, So we got Artie Lange and Willie Nelson, Mark Cuban, Penn Jillette. I mean, it's a whole cast of characters, and it's fun. It's funny because it's got some jokes in it. If you go to it's like going to see it. You see these documentaries at film festivals, they're usually interesting, but you don't laugh. God, if a movie makes you laugh, you only have to laugh 2 or 3 times and it's memorable. Blazing Saddles, the funniest thing in the world. And you realize you only laughed out loud probably 3 or 4. I mean, the whole thing was funny, but as far as laughing out loud, there aren't that many gags. So we're holding out for the film festivals to start up again, because to me, that's the whole point of making the documentary, so I can go up there and show it. And then people like you and people that are interested in the old Stern shows, they can ask questions. And I'm going to videotape all the Q&As, because that's going to be a whole nother documentary, because it goes deeper. And the devil's in the details. There's so much crap that people don't know. And it's not, it's not talking out of school stuff. It's just stuff that people don't realize or don't know. And, 18 years was a lot of time. So it's interesting,
When did you get a hold of Artie? Because last time we hadn't talked to him. So how did you get a hold of him, and how was he looking? And give us an update.
He was out of he got out of the hospital, and I think Ian went to his apartment. I'm not sure. And it wasn't long after that he had some more trouble. And then as far as I know right now, he's doing fine. I know for a few seconds he did a podcast with somebody, and then I think he was talking about maybe taking a gig. But then the whole pandemic completely obscured everything, because even if somebody wanted to work or was ready to work, they couldn't work. So everything is obscured. So who knows? I just knock on wood. I hope the guy's doing good, because I love him. He was good to me. He did the foreword to my book. Now he's been in my documentary, and whatever. I wish the best for him. And, he teeters, addiction's a rough thing. I got 20 in a month. I'm going to be 20 years sober. And I could reach for a beer tomorrow. You know what I mean? It's it's a very tentative thing. So, I still smoke pot, but, people say, well, then you're not really cured, or you're not straight. Look, whatever works for anybody, if I quit eating cupcakes, maybe I won't get thin, but at least I'll get a little thinner. You know what I mean? You just do what you can to stay, especially in the pandemic. It's insane. I don't know what it's like where you are, but Jesus Christ, I live with a beautiful girl on the water in a beautiful home with our 2 cats. We eat whatever we want. We have good friends, and we are going out of our fucking minds. So what it's like for somebody living inland in a small house with a couple kids, people were not made to live together 24/7. We are just not built to do that. Everybody I know, the most happily married people in the world and the best families, I pull a husband aside and say, this is pretty unnatural. They're like, you don't have a gun, do you? You know what I mean? It's pretty crazy.
Well, I love it. She's right over here. Yes, honey, I enjoy this every day. I love it. You mentioned your girlfriend. I know a lot of people.
Kick her out of the room so you can talk.
She's not over there. This was me looking I was doing a little acting myself, where I looked over.
Oh, very good, very good. That was very believable.
Well, I have to say it's funny, because I checked to see what people wrote about some of our past interviews, and every time the most asked question was, who's Jackie's girlfriend? Who is Jackie dating? So tell us a little bit, because I don't know if you want to talk about it, but how long?
I have no problem. I've been with Barbara for 5 years. The girl that I went out with before her, I was with for a little over 4 years. and my last girlfriend is currently married to Pat Cooper. She's 49 and he's 90.
I was going to say, was she 80? Well, Milton Berle died, and then Pat Cooper, and then you. So,
so So the deal is that I love to fuck. Well, I used to, and she didn't like to fuck, and she's an alcoholic, and I don't drink. So people were like, "How the hell did you guys last 4 years?" I said, "It's very simple. She's beautiful, and I'm really shallow." and I'm not making that up, Brad. I'm not making it up. She was very beautiful. We met, we had fun, and we did stuff together. And I brought her into the Howard Stern show, and Howard's like jaw hit the thing. It's like, Jesus Christ, because she was that pretty, but she was a pain in the ass, but she's that nice girl. And then we broke up, and it went pretty wild for a year. If I would have fucked a snake if you held its head. And then I walked in to do a gig, and the place was empty because everybody was in the showroom. And this very pretty girl was standing at the bar. And I walked over and said, "Who are you?" She said, "I'm Barbara. She brought the opening act, who had to be picked up at the train station. The actor was opening for me at the brokerage. And I said, "Are you married?" And she said, "No." I said, "Do you have a boyfriend?" She said, "No." I said, "Let's take a picture." I took a selfie of us and got her email address, and then spent a month trying to talk her into going out with me because she was a talent agent. And she didn't know me, but she knew of me. And, my reputation, people don't know me, think there's a monster walking around, and people know me, and they're like, "You're not the guy we've heard of." My friend Ian that made my documentary, we were radio partners for 8 years. And we met at the Friars Club 20 years ago. And 5 minutes after we started talking, he said, "You can't be the guy that's on the Stern show," because Howard had me painted as big and fat and angry and not funny and really disgusted with my life. And he's like, "You're the most delightful guy I ever met." I said, "Well, Howard, he's making us all rich with his exaggerations, But I talked her into going out with me, and we went out, and we hit it off pretty quick. And she's not, Emily's like 49 now. Barbara's 66. I'm 73. She's 66. So it's a little bit closer to normal. And she puts up with me well, and it's me and her and our 2 cats. And we just, we have a delightful time. She watches me smoke pot. We watch old movies. Unfortunately, I'm a lot fatter than I was because she's such a great cook. But everybody's putting on weight during the pandemic. But, I never drag her into these things to say hello, but she would. She's great. She's been booking cover bands and weddings and all that stuff for like 30 years, and she's really good at it. But of course, her business completely, so many businesses completely went to pot, so to speak, with the pandemic. But hopefully it'll all come back. She had to move her office into here. So not only are we together 24/7, but her goddamn office is an elbow away. So thank God we get along, But she's a good character. She puts up with me with my horrible, horrible, horrible jokes, and it works,
I walk around.
Whatever anybody else wants to know, for an old broad, she's got a nice rack. I don't know what they would want to hear.
Oh, let's see it. Yeah, show some pictures. Let's go. I walk around the house now. I didn't, for how I missed out on George Miller all those years going on Letterman. I just didn't remember him. So I watched YouTube and I see all these George Miller clips. And now I walk around telling George Miller jokes around the house, and they get really mad. I think my favorite George Miller joke was he gets on Letterman. He says, "Hi everybody, thank you for that applause. It's actually very exciting for me because I brought my wife and my daughter this trip, and thank you. Yeah, she's 13, and my daughter's 4." And I walked.
He was a real jokey joke,
Oh, I loved him. Another woman I have to ask you about, because researching, I watched it. Oh, let's see. Oh, there we go.
Oh, you can't really see.
She looks like you.
Yeah. Yeah, well,
That's good. She's 66?
Yeah, well, she wasn't there. That picture is the picture that we took 10 seconds after we met. So that was like 4 years ago, 5 years ago.
Well, and so I was saying...
You married? No. You got a boyfriend? No. Let's take a picture. Let's go out.
Is that how... See, I haven't dated in 5 years, so is that how... I guess that's how it works. Let's do a selfie, and now you got picture. Send me that...
You're not married?
No, I am. I've been married for 5 years. I haven't had to do a date or had to figure out how to get someone's number in a while, but that's a good play. Get a selfie. Oh, send me that picture. Boom, numbers in the phone.
That's how I met the girl before too. Like, let's take a picture, and when I did it, it was a very natural thing. It wasn't like, hey, this is my move. It's like, what a pretty girl. I'd love to have a picture with this girl, even if I never see her again. Well, I was the same thing with guys. What the hell.
I was mentioning that this beautiful woman. And I started, again, I kind of wanted to watch some old stuff to get my mind thinking. You and Robin had that wonderful chemistry, but I watched the one where she ignored you. You had no idea why, and she wouldn't tell you, which was great. And then obviously the one where I'm not doing the news, because she was on the beach and she couldn't read. Just tell me about that relationship you guys had, because she's definitely changed since you left. She doesn't have anybody really being a foil, but you would get under her skin, and it was great. And those were some of my two favorite. There's a bunch more, obviously, but the fact that she was like, I'm not speaking to Jackie. She's like she knows where her bread is buttered. So she is a phrase away from, destroying her whole thing. But she's a character. But we had a very strange relationship. And Howard is, not to be insulting, but he I don't think he grew up the same way. Well, maybe things were much different when I was a kid, because, when we were like in 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, you had your pals, you had the girls you hung around with, you had the guys, it was the whole thing. And even in college, there were so many girls that were like my pals. They were like, either weird or fat or for whatever reason, just somebody I just wasn't attracted to, and I had no intention of ever doing anything with them. And they knew it. And so we were pals. And there were times where we'd be fooling around, and I would grab Robin, not on the air, but we'd be talking, and I would throw her down on the couch and hop on and start humping her leg. But totally, as silly as it sounds, but it was totally platonic. It was me. I never said it out loud, but it was me fucking around with the fat girl. You know what I mean? There was nothing sexual about it. It was just me being goofy, and she'd giggle and be a whole thing, and Howard would be like, boy, you really love Robin, don't you? Man, you're really attracted to her. I couldn't say, no, she's the fat chick that I have no intention of ever fucking. But you can't say that. I would never say that, whether it hurt her feelings. I'm not saying it like I was invited. Don't get me wrong. But the point was, there was nothing sexual about it, but he just didn't comprehend that. And he'd talk about how, I was so attracted to her and blah, blah, blah. And it was ridiculous. But I did love screwing with her, because she would, she could be so pompous, and she was an idiot, The one thing she did that really enamored me to her, and when I realized what we were all in for the whole ride, we had just gone to mornings, and I was a regular cast member. I probably told you this story already. And one day I came in and I said, I was learning that everything's for the air, not to say anything in the office, because everything is fodder. You got 5 hours to fill. And I said, Howard, I got to tell you, I had a really wild, graphic, realistic sex dream about Robin last night. I mean, it was so realistic. And I wasn't lying. I mean, I really had like I don't know if it was a wet dream. I was already 38 years old, but it was very, very real, And so we all laughed, and it was pretty wild. And that's where he got on the whole thing with Jackie so attracted. The point was, I wasn't attracted to her, and the fact that happened, I thought was pretty funny.
But what really endeared me to her was like a week later or 2 weeks later, she came on the air and said, Howard, I have an admission to make. Last night I had a really wild sex dream about Jackie. And I thought, how cool is it that she would admit that? You know, she knew it was great fodder, and it was very, very funny. I'm sure they never replay that. Anything that's glamorizes Jackie doesn't get played. But that was, to me, that was like, wow, that's, you know, who else? That was like Gary admitting about his girlfriend making fun of him and stuff. You know, you just gave everything. You know, you just gave everything. And I thought that was pretty cool.
You guys subliminally were.
She got a little big for her britches, but that's all right. She needed big britches.
Well, and that's the weird. Howard just depends on her for some weird. It's very odd how much he talks about how much he needs her, because I think a lot of people think he doesn't need her, but it's very odd when you hear him talking.
You know who says that he doesn't need her? The same people that say, why did Costello have Bud Abbott hanging around? He didn't need him. If you ever saw Lou Costello without Bud Abbott, you couldn't get to the door quick enough. It's a very give-take relationship, you know, at least for what he's doing, you know. He could go on any show and do anything. And could he sit there and talk for 5 hours? I'm sure. But there's a whole different thing with tossing it back and forth. You know, they want to give me a show. I do a lot of podcasts. I talk to a million different people. You know, I did 3 already. You're my 3rd guy today. Because I love talking. I love telling the stories. And I love the whole thing and promoting stuff. But they want to give me a show. And I don't know if I do a show, I got to have somebody. I got to have somebody to talk to. Even just an engineer to say, blah, 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 blah. You know? You know what I mean? So you know what I mean? You got to toss the ball a little bit. You know, it's very interesting.
Well, it's good to see you can get that instant. Was this funny to somebody, and the fact that she laughs at everything, it makes it good.
Right. That is a little crazy, you know, because people say, "Oh, I can always tell Jackie when you wrote a joke because you laughed." I said, "No. What I do is I laugh at everything that's funny, and I laugh depending on how funny it is. And sometimes if it's something Fred wrote or something Howard said on his own." And it's really funny, I will scream, and people assume that I wrote it. And I'm not just laughing because I wrote it. I laugh when something's really funny. And so, fortunately, a lot of things I wrote I thought were really funny, or I wouldn't have written them. But her, you could say, you know, Bill Gates just got hit by a truck, and she goes, Robin, you got really big tits. Robin, I think I'm going to have diarrhea. You know, it didn't matter what he says. It's the same laugh every time, which is pretty, it's weird, but you know, 40 years later, she's still, so I guess somebody likes it.
I don't know if she's still doing it. I haven't heard a lot of late, but I guess she's still doing it. Couple more minutes with you, Jackie. I appreciate it. I did talk to Tom Chiusano. I think you may have seen that, and I thought it was interesting how he felt really bad about this the history of 20 years ago.
I don't want to talk about leaving the show. It's been up and down and all around, and nobody admitted this, and then they admitted that. And people say to me, you know, Jackie, when you talk about that, it's the same story that you told 20 years ago. I'm like, because that's what happened. I've never varied from the story of what happened, and I just could care less about it.
I thought it was interesting though that Tom was very. It hurt him more than I think I've ever heard him say. You know,
it was a regrettable decision on his part. I liked Jackie and still, you know, think kindly of Jackie. I have no idea how Jackie thinks of me. I haven't talked to him. That was the one handling that negotiation. And, as I had in the past, and he had, we had tough negotiations prior to that, if I remember correctly, where he had walked for a little bit, and and Howard always wanted him back. But in this one in particular, I had made sure that, Howard and I had conversations about it. He knew exactly what I was doing. I had talked to my boss, who was Mel, and said, this is, and made sure that I had all the money in line, and, had approvals for the money that I was offering him and all those kinds of things. I put what was a very generous offer, what I believe was a very generous offer to Jackie on the table, guaranteed employment. You know, and I won't go into the specifics of it, but it was it should have been a life changer for him, given where he was and had been, and I actually remember some of my words in the meeting. And I looked at him and said, Jackie, I should be the guy trying to downplay you, to not take this offer, because it's a lot. You know, I'm putting a lot on the table, but Jackie had encouraged me when I came back from cancer to kind of go on, when we started going on the road trips to Vegas, to make sure that I came, and said, why wouldn't you take it? Why not come? And so I appreciated that, and I appreciated the sense that I had of Jackie's caring about me at that point, and I tried to express that to him in this final meeting that we had, and I even said, I'm trying to remember the guy's name from MASH who left. And I used him as an analogy. The old TV show MASH, one of the main characters, left the show. And I said, don't be that guy. Stevenson, I think, was his last name.
Yeah, it was Hawkeye and Jamie Farr, the only two people, like Radar, the two people.
Yeah, but it was I think it was the first colonel, who was the boss of the MASH unit. And I said, don't be that guy. This is a serious offer. It's a lot of money, and we'd like you to stay. Obviously, I wouldn't put this on the table if we don't want you to stay. And he decided at that point that it wasn't good enough for him. And everybody, as I said, Howard knew, and the other principals that needed to know knew. And when he tried to come back after rejecting the proposal, it was decided. It wasn't my decision. It wasn't my end of the day decision. But it was decided that, nope, time to move on. And I've always felt bad about that. And if somehow this is reaching you, Jackie, I hope you understand that. I really did. I really did want you to take that. I really did want you to be part of it. But it was decided, it was enough, because what was going to happen the next time we went around.
I might work.
I wish I'd been able to encourage him with found the right words to make that offer stick with him to where he would have taken it.
I think he was Mr. Business Guy, but
so the good news is, so you're saying he's still alive, which is great, because I had no idea if he's still alive. Are you talking about recently?
Yeah, and I was curious if you guys would ever have do you have any hard feelings with Tom, or is that?
No. Could be, in all fairness to Tom, he had no say in any of it. It was all Howard and Buckwalter. Yeah, Tom, it was kill the messenger. When I told them I would take the job back, and they said they would get back to me, I thought it was so rude and cruel after 18 years to not have the class to call up and say, we don't want you back, we're going to pass. But that was not Tom's decision. He couldn't have called me up and said, Jackie, we're not taking you back. That was not his decision to make. I don't know that, but I know that. I'm sure I could hear Mel or Howard or Don say, fuck him, let him hang out to dry. I never had a problem with Tom. When Howard signed his contract back then, it was in the middle of December. He said, well, you can make your deal with Tom. And Tom made the offer. I said, no, that's not what I want. And he said, and I knew he either had cancer, or he was going to have cancer, and he was supposed. I said, listen, take your trip to Paris, and we'll talk about it when you get back. Who knew if the guy was going to die in 2 days? He's a human being. I'm a human being. I always liked him. He, as much as I fucked with him, that was my job. But he was a good guy. And he still is a good guy. And if he's still alive and kicking, I'm glad to hear that. So
he is. He was.
Maybe, you know what? Now that I know that, maybe I'll search him down and tell him I said hello. Maybe buy a steak for him or something.
I said I'm gonna try to get you both together at some point on this thing.
No. You don't have. I don't want somebody to orchestrate it. I'll chase him down. You can send me his contact info if you got it, because I'm. For all I know, he's got the same email 30 years later. Who knows?
He's not at K-Rock anymore. I did want to ask you, I've never asked you about your days with Eddie Murphy and the back days. When did you first see him, and when did you know right away? Because it was, you guys crossed paths. Tell me about just those days back in the early, I guess, late 70s, early 80s.
It's funny because I'm back in touch with Clint. It's a really, really great story about Eddie and Clint in the car with me and Dave Hawthorne. And it was a story when Howard always used to say, well, if you guys had driven Eddie an extra 100 yards, you'd all be in the movies. And his best friend Clint was in the car. And Clint, they just redid Coming to America. And Clint is one of the guys in the barber shop.
Right. He was in
the guys are Eddie, and one of them is Arsenio, and the other one's Clint, And I've been talking recently to the old guys. I was talking to Rob Bartlett and Minervini, some of the guys that, were at Dixon's White House Inn when we all hung there. And Eddie was like 16 or 17 years old, when I met him, when we all met him. And it was so funny because he was a nice guy, but he was so, and I don't even know if the word is cocky. He was so sure of himself. He was like, I'm going to be bigger than the Beatles. We're like, Eddie, shut up. I'm going to be bigger than the Beatles. And this famous story is like I was making my second comedy album at the East Side, and he said, Jack, those microphones, you making another album? And I said, yeah. He said, Jack, I want to have an album. I said, I'd love to help you, Eddie, but I'm too busy. Could you imagine if I had helped him with his first album? I'd be living in Malibu, But I
would call you delirious, actually, if you catch them.
I didn't find them all that funny. In the beginning, just about everything he did was, he basically just did Richard Pryor and Richard Pryor material, and then he just replaced Richard Pryor with Eddie material, which is even better. But I didn't think it was, I have audio tape of everybody from back then except him. I never turned on the tape recorder. I was not a fan of somebody. I didn't think somebody was funny just because they were black. I just didn't. And it was that simple. And he was very, it wasn't racist at all. I just didn't find it funny. But he was a nice enough guy. And, we went on to, I'll send you the stories, like when we're in the cars together, we'd all go out to do gigs, and he was great. And they needed a black guy for Saturday Night Live, and boom, he went to the moon. His first manager, Richie Tinkin, owned the comic strip in Manhattan, and then the one in Fort Lauderdale too. And Richie just passed away 2 or 3 weeks ago. And he was, one of the great guys, one of the great club owners, and him and another owner of the comic strip took on Eddie as a client. And, a year later they're driving around in white Rolls Royces and everything, they were bums from the Bronx, and, boom, but great characters. But Murphy was fine. And I ran into him here or there. I ran into him years later when we had just started the Channel 9 show. And for some reason, maybe we were broadcast, I forget, but I was at the China Club. And Eddie was there. And so he said, hey, Jackie, Eddie Murphy's over there. So I went over and said hello to him. He said, Jack, that Channel 9 show you guys do, that is the funniest thing on television. And no, I'm not going to do the show. I'll never forget. No, I'm not going to do the show. He was nice enough.
Ever keep in touch with him at all? Ever get a chance the last 10?
I'll tell you. He said something to me so long ago, and I don't know how it came back into my mind. I was like, whoa, because it's kind of long to explain. But in the beginning, there was like 6, 7, 8, 9 of us, and any 3, 4, 5 guys would wind up at a bar together or in a club, doing shows. I put on shows in all the different bar rooms on Long Island because I had an amplifier and speakers because I was a guitar player. I'd sing and play and tell jokes. And so the guys used to show up where I'd invite them. And so Eddie would come, or Minervini or Bartlett, because they could get on stage for 5 minutes. And there was no place else on Long Island to do that. And then as things moved along, we would do shows And at the end, I would always go on last, and I would always, at the end of my show, play one of my songs. And there were like maybe 3, 4, 5 songs. It'd be any one of them. And that would be the end of the show. And that's how I'd end the show. Because I'd usually host and bring up the other guys one at a time and do jokes in between. And one night at the East Side, Eddie just came up to me and said, because it was the same songs I play every time. So all the guys, they're coming out of their ears. And Eddie said to me, Jack, I got like 5 favorite songs and 3 of them are yours. And I thought of that years later. I'm like, Jesus Christ, because if you hear a song on the radio that something was out when you were in 7th grade, it rings a familiar bell, and I just know if he heard those songs, they would ring a bell with him. And now I'm back in touch with Clint. And I don't know. I don't really want to put Clint on the spot. But, if Eddie put a snippet of one of my songs in the movie, I'd be rich, But I'd be very curious to see if he remembered that. I know I asked Clint, do you remember the time when Hawthorne's muffler fell down and we were on the Southern State Parkway? He said, yeah. He says 40 years later, me and Eddie still laugh about that. So, everybody remembers everything, So there was never any animosity between me and him. You know what I mean? But there wasn't a real warmth. We all drove down to, strangely enough, the place that turned me on to Howard. Me and Minervania and Bartlett and Murphy all drove down to Garvin's Laugh-In in Washington, D.C. and auditioned. And the owners said that we were 4 of the worst acts they've ever seen in their life. But, years later, we wound up back there, But the whole thing was very interesting, And he went to the moon so fast. But it was great, It was really great. It was great, It was great for everybody. It didn't help anybody, but you see somebody go to the moon, it makes you think, well, maybe there's room for somebody else to go to the moon. You know what I mean?
Do you ever wonder why you didn't go to the moon? Because seriously, like you had an act that was funny. You had a Rodney Dangerfield type act, and then you started selling the jokes, right? I mean, when did you decide?
My act is old, dirty jokes, and it's really, really funny, but there's no place for it, People say, how come you don't do voiceovers? How come people haven't used you in sitcoms? And you know what? I don't know the answer to that. I think I'm a good character. I think I make people laugh. I've done tiny bits in tiny movies, but, nothing. First of all, I wasn't hungry. For 15 years on the Stern Show, I made more money and more money and more money and more money. And there was no way you could do the Stern Show and in between do anything else. And there was no desire to. Like when we had a week off, I came home and got drunk and slept. I wasn't I wasn't hungry for anything else, which in retrospect maybe was stupid. I didn't have anything lined up when I broke off the show. I didn't have anything lined up. I didn't know whether they were going to renew me or not renew me, but I really knew that I didn't care either way because I knew I was in bad shape. And had they said, okay, I don't know what would have happened, because I knew I had to get divorced, but it was too hard to do while I was working. And I knew I had to quit drinking, but if I was still on the show, I don't think I would have quit drinking. So I would have been dead. Who knows? I don't know anything. But I've never planned. In 1970, I didn't think about 1972. And in 1983, I didn't think about 1985. I just have never done that, So I never had a next big thing. What can I do? It didn't gel. It's not like I wasn't out there doing shows and doing what I could,
I remember when Howard would play your music. I enjoyed it myself. As Eddie said, I remember the just thinking about you. Da, 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 da. They were fun songs. I know he was making fun of you, but they were very catchy.
People still complain to me about, that, and I'm thinking about you. They say, Jesus, I listened to that song. I'm humming it for 3 weeks. I can't, it's like, what the guy the other day, my friend Goldberger said, Jackie, that goddamn song is an earworm. It climbs into your brain and lays its eggs and comes out the other end and you never forget about it, But who knows? We'll see what happens.
Well, I'm humming that, and I'm not humming "Party All the Time" by Eddie Murphy. So there's that. Jackie, I do every time we do this. I get really excited. I go back and look at some of the old stuff. I laugh hysterically. You've made me laugh for so many years. I appreciate you always doing this. I know we talked about your documentary. I know you're doing Cameo. Tell me, let's do some plugs. I'll get some clown music going. We'll do some plugs.
Cameo.com. It's so great. I do so many of these because I was made to do this. Like if you say, hey, we congratulate my friend Jeff on his divorce. He loves poop jokes. He's a Jewish guy. He loves when you torture him about it. You say happy birthday to my grandmother. She's 75. She's an old Stern fan. She loves sex jokes. And whatever they tell me to incorporate. And then for 2 or 3 minutes, I just go off. And a lot of people like, just your laugh is going to be worthwhile, And it's funny because it's methadone to me because I can't do shows. And, if you're a comic, or any kind of entertainer, you need to do what you do. And I sit there and laugh for 3 minutes doing these stupid cameos. It's like methadone to me. It gets me off. I do. And then I've got like 100 reviews, and every review is a 5-star review. And the way I shoot myself in the foot is it's the way you get one of these things is it's Cameo, like it sounds, Cameo, cameo.com/Jackie Martling. But if you go to that, it's got like 4 or 6 samples of cameos I've done, and they're all loaded with jokes. So if you just want to steal some jokes, you can just go on that website and listen to a few of the old cameos. And there's more jokes than you can handle. But I just did one. This was a new one. I've done every one you can imagine. 90th birthday party and my grandparents' 55th wedding anniversary. But yesterday, a guy asked me to do a video that they could play at his funeral. He said, now, I'm not dying. He said, I'm only 45 and I'm going to live to be 90. But I want this so they can play it and have a few laughs at my funeral. So I did like a couple of minutes of death jokes and horrible, horrible things that are very, very funny. And he immediately gave me a 5-star review. He's like, that's exactly what I wanted. And which is, that's odd. I think it's kind of fun if you think about it. I can see the guy with like an iPhone on his casket and, me going, hey,
Give me a death joke. Let's hear one. I want to hear a death joke.
A guy goes to his best friend's wake and he decides to leave and he goes in the coat closet and he opens the door of the coat closet and there's his best friend's widow. And she's blowing the funeral director. And he says, Sylvia, what are you doing? She says, in my grief, I should know what I'm doing. Which is just so funny,
Well, I'm sure the family will be so enthused when they get to that funeral and hear that joke.
At the end, I said, by the way, if anybody in the family is not enjoying this, go fuck yourself. And if you want to complain, pry open the casket and see if Charlie... No, I didn't say anything.
And let me, lastly...
Everybody, it's just like sex. Everybody looks at death and sex and poop. And everybody looks at everything differently, Some people don't talk about sex, but talk about shit all day. And other people don't talk about shit, but you can talk about blowjobs all day. Nobody's right. Nobody's wrong. Whatever floats your boat. You know what I mean?
Well, I'm going to try and stump the joke, man, and then we'll go. Guy at the bar, sitting there. It's about 2 a.m, and he throws up all over himself. Guy next to him goes, oh, my God, you're going to be in deep shit. He's like, oh, my wife, she's so pissed. I do this all the time. He goes, put a 20 down.
He's shitting your pants, too.
That's my favorite punchline of all time. He shit my pants, too.
There's a great story about that. There's a guy named Don. I never can think of his name. Don Sebastian, who worked he was an old-time Catskills comedian, and he worked in Florida in the 70s. And he worked in a place called the Aztec Lounge in Florida. And he was the only guy I know besides me, like in 1979, I made albums and filled them up with my jokes and sold them at my shows. Well, when I was living with my friend Archie in 1977, him and his father would go to Florida to go fishing. they went to Florida and they went to this place, the Aztec Lounge, and saw this comedian, Don Sebastian. And they bought his comedy album for me. I'm sure it's online. If you look, Sebastian, like it sounds, and they brought it home. And I listened to the album, and there were some jokes that I hadn't heard that was stealable. And so I listened to it, and I really enjoyed it. And then a couple of years later, I'm on the Stern Show or at whatever point, and they asked me, and I don't know if you know who Otto and George were.
The puppet guy.
Very filthy ventriloquist. Yeah. It was me and Otto and George and another one or two very, very dirty comedians. And we went on the Morton Downey Jr. show. I don't know if you have any idea who that is.
Got smoked a little bit. Had a
talk show. It was a little crazy. And it was going to be a debate between us and the Catskill and Friars comedians, Freddie Roman, Stewie Stone, and Don Sebastian. And meanwhile, the guy worked at the Aztec Lounge in Fort Lauderdale or in Miami, and I'm sure he only sold 4 of those stupid records. But of course, I had one of them. And so the argument is, why do you guys have to work blue? There's no reason to work blue. You can't, that's a crutch. You don't have to work blue to make people laugh. And our argument was, hey, we do what I do, leave us alone. So this is Morton Downey Jr. just trying to, rub 2 cats together, right? So Freddie and Stewie and Don are sitting there and we're talking. And they said to us, you be dirty as you want and we'll just bleep it. And I don't think they ever wound up airing the episode, but it exists somewhere because somebody's told me they saw it. But all of a sudden this guy, Don Sebastian, goes, there's no reason for you guys to be off color. It's not necessary. None of us have had to work dirty. And I said, Don, tell me if this sounds familiar. Well, you better give him $40 because he's shitting your pants too. The guy went fucking white. He was like, I don't even remember what he said. What he said, how'd you find my old album? Or I don't know what you're talking about, but it was so great. It's almost like, when you have that extra bullet left in your revolver, it was just so funny. So I have a history with that joke, and that is a great, great, great joke. Great show.
And my favorite punchline.
All right, now I'll tell you my favorite new joke. Well, I'm sure it's a million years old. There's an old guy sitting at the bar. The bartender says, how old are you? And the guy says, 97. He says, 97? What's your secret? One time I blew a guy for his watch. No, I mean the secret to your longevity. I eat fruits and vegetables.
Let me try and stump you with one more. This is my dad's favorite. So in honor of my father, there's a father and a daughter, and the daughter wants a beautiful dress for the prom. And she said, the daughter,
your brother needed to rent a tuxedo.
Your brother needed a suit.
That's another classic.
I'm glad I didn't have to tell that whole thing because it's kind of. But the people around. I just remember my dad would tell it. There would be this noise. It was in the '80s when he would tell it.
A joke that's kind of related to that. You probably heard this, where the wife keeps bugging the husband that she wants to go hunting, and he won't take her hunting. She keeps bugging him. Finally, he says, "All right, I'll take you hunting."
I do know this one. I think. Yeah.
No, I'm not going to, the dogs didn't want to go hunting either. It's such a great show.
Something like, I came back or something by myself for a reason or whatever. Yeah, it was.
Right.
I remember you said you were going to look up how did jokes begin. Did you ever are you still on the hunt of how did jokes start?
I got a guy, this is so interesting. There's a guy I run into, I have so many friends that are gazillionaires and famous, and God, I had lunch yesterday with a guy that wrote 500 Law and Orders. I had lunch, and another guy at lunch is telling me about this ridiculous, incredible new media where the guy's doing holograms and he can transport, and he's just became the CEO of his company and it, blah, blah, blah. And I turned to him, I go, are you talking about Nuzzy Nussbaum? And his fucking head exploded. He said, how do you know him? I said, I know everybody. I've known the guy for 20 years. And it's like, It's like a hologram. It's almost like The Fly. You know, you go in a box and they recreate you wherever. You know, it's interesting shit. But this other guy sends me an email and he goes, listen, nobody's really done an in-depth documentary about, you know, the old Stern show with you and Gary and Fred and them. And I think it'd be a really interesting documentary. And I wrote him back and said, first of all, those guys will never be in anything with me. They wouldn't be allowed to. And they already did a documentary on me that's really good and it's finished. You're going to love it. I said, but you know what? Nobody's ever made a documentary about jokes and where they come from and why they come from and blah, blah, blah. And I said, I know it'd be fascinating as well as funny. And he wrote me back and he said, you know what? That's a better idea than my idea. And I just have to finish what I'm working on. This guy has done, I'm not a fan of Star Trek, so this means nothing to me. I don't know about you. The guy has done 12 videos or whatever you call them with William Shatner. And I guess Star Trek fans are like hockey fans or Jet fans. The people that are into it are voracious, just voracious for this crap. And he said, we're just about to embark on a new Star Trek. I got the idea. And he put it on GoFundMe or one of those things, you know. And he says, as soon as I'm done dealing with this, me and you and Ian will get together and talk about the jokes documentary because I think it'd be fantastic. And then like a week or two later, he emails me and goes, go check out I don't know, it was Kickstarter, GoFundMe, whatever it was called. And that was 2 months ago. They have raised $1.3 million to make this, you know, with you know, $10 from this guy and $100 from this guy. I guess these Star Trek fans are just, you know, and Shatner's 90, but he's still out there kicking and selling, and you know, he's a whole deal. You know, I said to him, are they all Star Trek? You should just do one on him. You just find out what he eats. You know, he's like 90, he's going strong. So yeah, the bottom line, the answer to your question, of course, is yes, I'm definitely going to do that. You know, because it's more interesting every second. Because everybody I meet, like you, here's my favorite joke. Do you know this one? And I always know it so fast, and there's always a story behind every joke, and I remember where I heard it, and so it's interesting because it's such a slice of Americana. It really is. You know, you go to a party full of Broadway producers or debutantes or midgets or baseball players. 5 seconds after the party starts, everybody's in little groups telling dick jokes. That is just how it works. Like it or lump it, you know, and that there's no denying that, you know. So there's got to be something. I tell people, when the nuclear bombs go off and there's nothing left, the only thing that's going to be left on Earth is going to be cockroaches and my jokes. And they're not my jokes, but they will be because I'm going to claim them just before the bombs go off. You know?
The Jokeland archive back there. Jackie, as I said, I really do appreciate it. I love doing this. I love hearing your voice. I love talking to you. And I look forward to seeing the documentary come out and the joke documentary. And hopefully we'll do this again. It seems like we got a little rapport going here. Maybe every 6 months we'll have a fun and I'm going to stump you one of these times.
All right. Well, do your best. Do some research. Cameo.com/Jackie Martling. And one other thing, anybody who's watching this, I really do respond to every email I get. My email is jokeland@AOL.com, JOKELAND@AOL.com. And I say that on every interview. And I get so many emails. I'm just testing you. I know you don't answer these. And I write back, I really do. You know, now buy something, you cocksucker, you know.
Well, he's got books, CDs, and documentaries and everything. Jackie the Joke Man, thank you very much. And this is brought to you by masses.com. Go there and check out the menus. We'll talk to you next time.
Tell me the name of your sponsor.
Masses, MASSAS Restaurants.
MASSAS, is that a Midwest thing?
Yeah, it's a local, it's a family-owned business, a good family here in St. Louis, an Italian family making Italian food. You gonna come join? You gonna come by and have a meatball with me one day?
I will come out there just to have a meatball with you. To MASSAS?
Masses. STLmasses.com. Yeah. Why do you care? I'm curious why you care.
I'm going to send him a dirty joke book.
Okay, there you go. Yeah. STLmasses.com is their website over there. And again, thank you, Jackie, for sending them a dirty joke book. They'll love it. And we'll see you next time.